Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters. Welcome to this unusual, not normal live chat. I'm so excited that you're joining me, whether you're joining live or watching it later. If you are watching live, go ahead and comment your questions if you have any. Jessica's here monitoring and she'll feed those to me so I can answer them, whether it's about this current challenge or anything else in general. Like I said, this is not my normal live chat because we had so many orders that were delayed. And so I wanted to kind of throw a special one to the people that didn't get their panels in time. So an order update, if you haven't got your panel yet, it should be coming very, very soon. Apologize for the delay. We were waiting on our shipment of fabric to come from the manufacturer. And as soon as it would come, we would cut, ship. And I know that it can be frustrating when you're ready to start the challenge, but you don't have the panel. First of all, I do want to say thank you so much for buying the products and supporting us. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. And again, I apologize that you didn't get it in time for the start of the challenge. The good thing is the videos are always available on my YouTube channel and my website. So even if you didn't get your panel in time, even if life happens and you don't get a chance to, keep up exactly with the videos, it's totally fine. You can watch them at your leisure. So that kind of takes some of the pressure off there. A lot of the times during my live chats, people will say, oh my gosh, I'm so far behind. And I'm like, there's no behind. You're not behind, you're right on time. Life is stressful enough. Let's not make quilting stressful as well. So again, thank you so much, and I apologize for the inconvenience. And I thought, wow, what could I do for the people that didn't get their panels in time? Maybe just a private, small live chat, just in case, you had questions that didn't get addressed in the previous one. So thank you for being so understanding. And with that, again, you can always go to YouTube, my YouTube channel, or quiltingismytherapy.com, and that's where you'll find the videos, the free downloadable diagrams, the expanded resources, all that stuff that you need. So very excited. If you haven't had a chance to watch my previous week's live chats, you can always check those out too. So I did a week 1 recap, week 2 recap, and tomorrow I'll do a week 3 recap. So you can check those out and ask your questions live, of course. Now I do have a couple of commonly asked questions or things that we have seen throughout the challenge I was going to address, and then Jessica I can see her scribbling furiously, and she can hand those to me too. So a couple things when you get your panel. I know some of you typed that you got it with, got your panel last night or very, very recently. Preparing your panel, you can trim it up. There's instructions on how to put the borders with it if you ordered that. For those of you that are quilting on a sewing machine, you can stabilize your quilt sandwich in any method you prefer. I don't usually include the specifics of that because I don't want to limit anybody from doing whatever they will do. I like to use fusible batting, but as long as those 3 pieces, the back, batting, and top, are put together, it's fine. In the videos, I do put some pins so people can see that it's stabilized. And then for those of you that are on the long arm, so this is a very, very common question. You might notice we kind of jump around. We don't work top down like we normally would on a long arm. So in that point, it's kind of up to you. If I were quilting along with me, which I kind of am, but on the long arm, I would wait until the last week and do it all at once. I don't want to have to take the quilt off my frame and put it back on and vice versa. So, but whatever you want, however you want to handle it. Again, those videos are available indefinitely, so you can take advantage of those whenever you want. Now in the video, and I did say this during my first live chat, you see me using the ruler on the sewing machine. I like to use a ruler when quilting because I feel comfortable with that. However, you don't have to use a ruler when quilting the dot-to-dot method. You can freehand it. In some of the videos, you can see me do a little bit of it without the ruler, just because I want to prove it's possible. But on a long arm, I'm going to use a ruler no matter what, just because those diagonal lines are just tricky to quilt as I'm going. If you are comfortable with quilting with a straight edge ruler and you already have one, great, use that one. In the videos, I'm using slim, but any straight edge will work. It totally doesn't matter. I don't want you to feel like you have to have all these things to get started. I just want you to kind of jump in and have fun with it. Now, when I'm working with my ruler on the sewing machine, I'm going in all different directions, but don't forget that you can change the orientation of your quilt. When I travel and teach, that's the one thing I feel like quilters aren't always aware of, that you can pause, think through, turn your quilt if you're on a sewing machine to make it easier. I say it a lot in the videos, and in fact, I edit out several times, and there's still several in there, but you can change up the orientations of how you quilt the design based on your preferences. Now, I get it. If you're new to quilting and you're like, I don't even know what I'm doing, then just follow the way I show you. But just know that as you're using these on your quilts, You might find that you like to do it one way versus the other way, and that's totally fine. The more you do something, the more you kind of find your own style and the way that you like to do it. So again, if you need a rule to follow, I'll show you how I like to do it, but that's not the only way. And in fact, it changes depending on the quilt I'm working on in the situation. So don't feel like you can't, do that. Now, marking tools. Again, this is a common question we get asked. When you're quilting your design, in the beginning, as you're learning the steps or the path of the design, you might want to mark out all those steps, and that's great. That will show you where you're going and take away a little bit of that doubt as to putting the design together. But as you get more comfortable with it, you might not need to mark out every step. Or maybe you do. It's fine. Whatever you will do is what you should do. So in the videos, we see some dots. I don't mark out the whole design often. In fact, as we get into further videos, you'll see less and less marking. But just know that whatever you will do is what you should do. If I could be in everybody's quilting room and say that to them as they're quilting, I would love to be able to do that. One last question I have, and I'll take Jessica's ones that she is just, I'm sorry, she's just writing her little heart out over there. What about stitching in the ditch? Okay, very, very common question. I like to stitch around the seams of my block because I like how it looks. It is not required, it's not necessary. It's whatever you want to do. If you need a rule, then go ahead and do it. If you're like, I don't want the stress of that, I'm already learning this design and how to do it without freaking out, then leave it out. It's just an optional thing. Now, there are some designs that I'll show you stitching in the ditch is part of the design. Like I'm using that SID, as we call it, or stitching in the seam, to move around. But at any point with any of these designs, if you're like, no, I don't want to do that, you could just tie off and start a new line of quilting at the next point. So again, take these designs, but make them yours, kind of, turn them how you want them to do. All right, can I wash my panel before sandwiching it? Cold or warm water? You absolutely can wash your panels or your fabric. I don't myself, and I wouldn't necessarily suggest it, just because you're gonna have to dry it and then iron it and then get started. But I know that some of you already do that, and that's totally fine. It's not required. I have heard, I don't know, because I don't pre-wash my fabric, but if you're going to wash part of it, just wash everything. You don't want some unwashed and some washed. So if you have a little bit of free time, if you're nervous about starting, maybe you go ahead and wash it. And as far as cold or warm water, it's up to you. I don't think it matters, but hopefully that helps. I haven't used glide thread before. Should I use it in the bobbin too? So glide thread can work in the bobbin. Just when you're winding it, be careful because that slipperier thread, it has a little bit of a slipperiness, I can't say the word. It might not wind correctly. So if you wind your own bobbin and it's spongy, it's like squishy, or it's not evenly wound, it's not going to quilt right. So just make sure that it's winding correctly. I like to use pre-wound bobbins because I'm incredibly lazy. Like the older I get, the lazier I get. And so the pre-wounds that I use are more like of a cotton type, so they have a little bit more grip to them. That all to be said, if you're having trouble with glide in your bobbins, wind a different thread in there. So maybe a cotton or a fill, something that has a little bit of grab to it. But plenty of people use glide in the bobbins with no problem. But same number of people get very frustrated with that same situation. So it just depends. Hopefully that helps. What size needle do I recommend? It depends on the size of thread that you're using. Super frustrating, right? When you sit down and you're like, I'm going to work on this design, I'm going to start quilting, and your thread is breaking. A lot of that could be the needle. You want to make sure it's the right size because the eye of the needle will be big enough to accommodate that thread without shredding. So with the glide thread, an 80 or a 90 size needle, but most thread manufacturers and needle manufacturers will include suggested sizes. So there you go with that. And any particular thread, whatever you want to quilt with, I will say you want to use a high quality thread. As we're quilting, no matter what machine you're on, you're putting stress on that thread, moving the sandwich or moving the machine. And cheaper thread has, shorter plies, it's not as good quality, and it's prone to breaking. I tell my new long arm owners, if it works, it works. So if you have something laying around and you try it out and it's quilting fine, great. But if it's not quilting well and it's not meant for machine quilting, then maybe go ahead and get a different thread. So I could talk for hours about thread, but I won't. Is there any reason I can't just use a straight stitch and use a foot instead of free motion? Great question. Why can't I just use a walking foot? You absolutely can. You can definitely do a walking foot. There's two reasons that I don't. One reason, it's called the free motion challenge, not the walking foot challenge. But as you're using these designs on your quilts, especially as we get to more, not complicated designs, but designs with more steps, every time we change direction, that is going to be a turn of your quilt. So think about the wedges that we're doing. It's like a triangle. That's 3 different turns for one wedge. And if I'm doing a starburst design with 8 wedges, we're looking at 24 different turning of the quilt. Now, absolutely can. Definitely. If that's what you're like, that's the only way I'm going to do it, for sure. But if you get brave enough to try it with a free motion foot, you can quilt it in all those different directions without changing direction. So you can do it. I just don't show it in the videos because it opens up a whole nother can of worms that I don't want to get into, but you definitely can. All these designs can be done with a walking foot. Just some will take longer than others to do. I have a question about the middle of the wedges and how to move from the middle onto the next wedge. I keep getting a wiggly line, trying to force my line away from the previous line. So I'm guessing as you're coming into the wedge and then you're going back out, maybe it's kind of shimmying. The good news is that's going to come with practice. As you get more comfortable and confident within the design, you'll be able to move in and out of that point smoothly and confidently. Now, it doesn't take as much practice as you might think, but what we're doing is we're, kind of going like, imagine a ball dropping, right? We're kind of bouncing in and out. So sometimes it's hard to get the use of, or the ease of movement in there, especially if you're working on a long arm. I'm not sure what kind of machine you're working on, but a long arm, I'm engaging 2 sets of wheels, and sometimes it's hard to get them to go just a little bit in that direction. Again, it will come with practice, but I will say that using a thread color that blends in with a quilt top will cover a multitude of quilting sins. So it will definitely kind of just not show all those little bits and bobbles, because when we're done with those wedges, the thing that's going to be most noticeable is the unquilted area in the wedges. Now, when you're practicing or you're watching my videos, I'm using contrasting thread so you can really see what I'm doing. But on an actual quilt, I'm going to use a thread color that blends. So hopefully that helps. You said you travel from one square to another by using the seam in between, but on this one, are you crossing over the black strips? Yeah, so don't you love how I did that to you? I loved the black strips in between because it made it look like piecing. It was beautiful, but from a efficiency standpoint, sometimes that can be like very frustrating. Yes, I've been quilting right over my lines, just in kind of like little bits, little points. And then if I was totally worried about it showing up, I could take a black fabric marker and color that in. But the way that the challenge is set up, as we're kind of plopping these designs in here, I've just been half and half, just starting a new line of quilting for the next one. So you can just travel in between. I promise it's not super noticeable, especially if you're like, oh, it's only like a quarter inch or maybe a little bit more. So you can cross right over those black strips if you want. I'll try to remember to pull up a picture and show what mine actually looks like, because when you step back, you don't see that, but when you're up close, you can definitely see where I've cheated down there. Now, when I talk about pulling up thread or starting a new line of quilting, I just don't like to do that because I've kind of grown adverse to it. I don't know why. It's just this weird neurotic tendency I have. There's no problem with starting a new line of quilting. It doesn't take that long. But when I started machine quilting or long arming for the very first time, my machine didn't have a needle up and down button, so I had to hand crank the wheel each time. And so I got really annoyed at starting lines of quilting. So hopefully that helps. If we're going to use SID, stitching in the ditch, should we do the entire panel before we do any of the quilting? It's up to you. Don't you love it? It's like a choose your own quilting adventure. If you're working on a long arm and you want to be able to move the quilt back and forth, you want to be able to take it on and off, yeah, go ahead and stitch in all those seams and then come back and do it. On a sewing machine, same thing. If you wanted to put your walking foot on, stitch down those seams with the walking foot, take out your pins, and then start free motioning, that's a great option. But my personality or my tendency is that I don't like to do the same thing for a long time. So I like to just kind of establish my area and fill it in. So I do it in chunks. Again, it's totally fine either way. I'm not familiar with fusible batting. Is it fusible on both sides? So there's several different ways that you can make your quilt sandwiches. And I know like basting spray is one of them. I don't really have a good area for that without getting spray everywhere. I don't usually like using pins because they're like speed bumps, kind of get in the way too much. So I like the fusible batting, and the fusible batting that I use is only fusible on one side. There are some that are fusible on both sides, but in my experience, some of those can get really stiff and it's hard for it to adhere. So I do the one-sided fusible, and I place the fusible up so that the quilt top is on the fusible. The batting already kind of has a little bit of a static-y kind of electricity that kind of holds those layers together. So again, your mileage may vary. You might have a different option with that, but just know that that's kind of how I do it. All right, I got one last question, and then I will let you go. Again, I know this has been a really kind of informal live chat. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to ask any questions that might have came up. Again, thank you so much for being understanding and flexible. It's been a busy couple weeks for sure. If I outlined the outside of the black lines, would they pop? Yes. So leaving those black lines just kind of unquilted that are on the panel, it's really going to make that kind of stand out, and it makes it look like piecing. So I actually had the panel kind of hanging up for pictures, and somebody thought I'd pieced it. And I'm like, no, I'm not that crazy. But yeah, so any unquilted area will kind of stand out from the rest and just kind of make them pop out. So kind of a fun option there. I like how it looks like the stained glass kind of applique look. So definitely kind of fun. So again, thank you for being understanding. Appreciate your patience. Those of you that have gotten your panels, even if it's like today or yesterday, you can follow the instructions, watch those videos, and still join me for the weekly live chats. And even as we move past this challenge, and if you're not finished, you can still reference past challenges in my live chats. So if you're like, oh, I'm working through the machine quilting with rulers one and I just can't get it, help me out, I'm glad to help. That's why I do the weekly live chats. So it's not just specific to the current one, it can be whatever we want to talk about. And so if you are free tomorrow, Thursday at 3 p.m. Central, that's when I'll do the week 3 recap, and we'll talk about that. And if you think of any questions that you need answered, you can ask them there too. So I hope that you all have a great rest of your day. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. And if you're in the parts of the world that's freezing right now, I hope you stay warm, and I will see you tomorrow. See you soon. So happy quilting, everybody.